the chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, Dr. Ben Carson.
My wife Candy and I are delighted to be here, particularly when we have conservative political action conference associated with Latino Wall Street, two groups that believe in the American dream. There have been so many who've said the American dream is dead now. Have you realized that we're the only country that even has a dream? There's no French dream. There's no Canadian dream. They used to think they had one. But we're the only country that really has a dream. And it's something that we need to fight very hard to keep. And there are those who are trying to convince people that we're victims, and that victimhood is rampant in our country. Victimhood is rampant in our country. And this is the way that people like Mamdani in New York win, by convincing people that they're victims and that you can solve the problem by blaming other people, by taking the resources of other people. Class warfare has been such an important factor. When I was a child growing up in Detroit, there were so many people who were telling me, you're a victim, the system is against you, you can't win, abandon your dreams. And I was fortunate enough to have a mother who didn't believe in that. Even though she had only a third grade education, got married at age 13, had a very difficult life, she knew that education was the key. So very important, because what the socialists do, what the Marxists do, is they miseducate people so that they don't know the facts. When people don't know the facts, they become very easy prey. And that's exactly what is going on in our country right now. Most of the kids that you see running around on these campuses talking about the river to the sea, they don't know what river, they don't know what sea. They don't know anything. But because they don't have a solid educational foundation, they're like leaves blowing in the wind. So easy, unfortunately, to change. And I was a terrible student, and I was listening to that garbage, and I was feeling like a victim. But my mother made me stop. She made me start reading books. She turned off the TV. I wasn't very happy about it. Neither was my brother very happy about it. But we had to do it. And as I started reading those books, I started reading about people of accomplishment from all backgrounds and how that knowledge, that education empowered them, I began to realize that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you is not somebody else. It's you yourself. And that changed me. And I got to the point where if I had 5 minutes, instead of watching TV, I wanted to read a book. And I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class in the course of a year and a half, much to the consternation of all the ones who used to laugh and call me dummy, who are now coming to me saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? And I would say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was probably a little obnoxious, but it sure felt good to say that to those turkeys. But I had the same brain when I was at the bottom of the class that I had at the top of the class. And that is really the key factor to recognize here. And think about how those who want to fundamentally change our society are doing it through miseducation. Look at the way that they're attacking our children who have brains that are not fully developed. The brain starts to develop immediately at conception. And it develops millions of neurons every day. Later on, billions of neurons every single day. That's why when a baby is born after 9 months, that brain is still developing at a very rapid pace. And that's why little newborn babies sleep 20 to 22 hours a day, because their brain is developing so fast. It continues to develop right up into the mid to late 20s. Some people it never develops, but you know, the fact of the matter is, we're taking 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old kids who have undeveloped brains and taking advantage of their natural curiosity and suggestibility and trying to confuse them about whether they're boys or girls without even notifying their parents. And that is nothing short of child abuse that is going on in the very midst of our society. Those are the kinds of things that are allowed when people are silent and don't speak up. And it's so important that those of us who are people of faith and of common sense really speak up and be bold. You know, one of the problems is that people are very timid, and that really affects your life. You know, when I was a kid, fear had a very big impact on me because I was afraid of dogs. And every time I came out of the house, first thing I did was look around and see if there's a dog. And I'd be on my way to school, and I'd be almost there, and then there'd be a dog. And I'd have to turn around and go all the way around the block, and then there'd be another dog. And I was late to school all the time. The teachers were tired of me. And then I met a man. I was 8 years old. He said, "Benny, if you don't show any fear of the dog, they won't bother you." He says, no matter how big and ferocious they are, if you don't act like you're afraid of them, they won't bother you. I said, "Are you sure about this?" He said, "Absolutely." I said, "I'm going to try this out." There was a ferocious dog down at the end of the block. I said, "I'm going to walk down there." So I go strolling down there quite confidently. And Rusty, that was the dog's name, sees me. And he comes charging, running, snarling, barking, runs right up to my leg. And I said, this was a mistake. And he sniffs my leg, goes back to the porch and lays down. That was the last time he ever came after me. He would go after other people. He would never bother me because he knew I wasn't afraid of him. And that is such an important concept. Moving forward without fear, it gives you what you need to be effective. And what we have to recognize is what's going on in our society now with all these non-logical things that are going on. This is not an accident. This was intentional. All you have to do is look at the congressional record, January the 10th, 1963. Congressman Herlong of Florida read into the record the 45 goals of communism in America. There were things like gaining control of the school systems and the teacher unions so that you could indoctrinate the kids, gaining control of the media, television, and Hollywood so that you could change the culture in America, making sexual perversion normal, natural, and healthy, denigrating the role of fathers in the family, denigrating the role of the family in general, and subjugating it to the government, driving wedges between parents and children. Just right down the line, you can see all the things they were doing because they realized that our country was much too strong to overcome militarily, but it could be destroyed from within by attacking our faith and our families. And have you noticed family formation is lagging in our country now? People are not getting married. They're not having children. In the 60s, the average birth per woman was 3.6, and now it is 1.6. We have a real significant problem there that we really need to start thinking about and dealing with, quite frankly. And where do kids get their values from? They get them from their family traditionally. But if you don't have families forming, then they're going to get them from other places, and they're going to get them from someplace. Social media, school. It was a tremendous thing yesterday when the Supreme Court decided on behalf of parents that parents had the right to determine what their children learned in school. And not all of this left-wing stuff that's going on. But how easily could it have gone the other way? And they also made the decision that these rogue judges, federal judges, couldn't make national law. That is an incredible save for us as a nation, but look how close we were to fundamentally changing our nation. And this is why it's so important that every one of us be very, very active. That's why we formed the American Cornerstone Institute, which looked at the cornerstone principles that made America great. Our faith, think about that. Our Judeo-Christian values would teach us to love your neighbor, not to hate your neighbor, not to try to cancel your neighbor if they have a different yard sign, but to love your neighbor. Liberty, the ability to lead the life that you want to lead, as long as it's not interfering with the lives of other people. Community, the sense of working together. If you look at the writings of the founders of this nation, there was a phrase that they used a lot, the common good. What's good for all the people, not what's good for this group versus that group, but what works for all of us. Something we need to really get back to. I mean, if it was harvest time and Mr. Jones broke his leg, everybody else harvested his crops. Didn't matter what his religion was, didn't matter what his politics were. He was their neighbor and he needed help. This is something that we have to get back to and recognize that we're not enemies. We, W, R, A, not in enemies, E, wane. We've let hatred and division wax for a long time. It's time to let it wane if we really want to elevate ourselves as a nation. What a difference that makes. And bring God back into our lives again, and not allow the secularists and the leftists to make us lose our faith. Remember, this is a country that is unique in the sense that our founding document says that our rights come from our Creator and not from government. Therefore, our rights cannot be taken from us by government. It's something that we have to be willing to fight for and understand. And I look at my own life. There I was, an angry teenager. At one point, I tried to stab another youngster. And the only thing that saved him is he had a large metal belt buckle on under his clothing. And the knife blade broke, and he fled in terror. But I was more terrified than he was, recognizing that I was trying to kill somebody over nothing. And I locked myself in the bathroom, and I started thinking, and I started praying, and I started reading the Bible. And I realized that the reason that I was so angry is because I was selfish, and that I should take myself out of the center of the equation and put somebody else in there. And that solved my anger problem. But what does it tell you about the good Lord? He took the knife out of the hands of an angry teenager meant to harm people and replaced it with a scalpel to save lives. That's the kind of God that we serve. And you know, he also has a sense of humor, because that day I started reading from the book of Proverbs. And I start every day and I end every day that way until this very day. And who wrote the book of Proverbs? Solomon. Well, my middle name happens to be Solomon, so he knew that I was going to have that affinity. And When Solomon became the king of Israel, what was the first thing he did that brought him great fame? 2 women came to him claiming to be the mother of the same baby. And what did he say? He said, divide the babies. Well, isn't that when I became very well known, when I divided babies too? So he has a very great sense of humor, something that we should keep in mind. And when I became Secretary of HUD, someone came to me, a high government official, and said, we are delighted, we are so happy that you are here. I know it's going to make a big difference for us all. But you have to stop all this God stuff. I told him to go jump in the lake, because we don't need to stop the God stuff. We need to remember the God stuff and elevate the God stuff and bring God back to the center of our lives. Thank you so much.